Друзі, вітаємо у Харківському медіахабі. Ми розпочинаємо наш брифінг, який буде присвячено темі підтримки України у Сполучених Штатах Америки. Я радий вітати нашого гостя. Це пан Том Брюер, сенатор-республіканець від штату Небраска. І ми побудуємо нашу сьогоднішню з вами бесіду таким чином, що ми заслухаємо доповідь пана Брюера. Також я зараз надам слово сержанту Збройних сил України від Генерального штабу Ештон Сіріо. І після цього ми перейдемо до питань. Робоча мова буде англійською, ці відео буде відсубтитровано. Тож ми починаємо. Sergeant, it's your part.
So to everyone who's here with us at Kharkiv Media Hub, it's good to be back in the Iron City that is Kharkiv. I wanted to introduce Senator Breuer today because he is a man of great resolve. He truly is a man of Kharkiv. And it was a little over 2 years ago that under very intense bombing, Senator Breuer was here with several of his advisors wanting to understand what the war for liberty and liberation in Ukraine was truly about. And a little background on why Senator Breuer is the man to be able to relay this information to the world and understand it in a way that very few can. He is a retired colonel who served in the United States Army for 36 years. He received 2 Purple Hearts, and his first trips to Ukraine were in 2010 and 2011, where he piloted Black Hawk helicopters on their way to the Middle East. Senator Breuer was then elected to represent the people of Nebraska in 2016, where among his legislative wins was a tremendous victory for the people of Ukraine. Senator Breuer passed a law with his colleagues. He sponsored the law that allowed for Ukrainian refugees in the United States to be able to be given commercial driver's licenses, which were good across America, in order for them to immediately take their skills and start working to support themselves in the US and their families back home in Ukraine. Senator Breuer was also instrumental in making certain that the Ukrainian people received $61 billion in aid from the legislators in Washington, D.C. He welcomed our command to Washington in December, flew out there on a broken leg, and in doing so assured us we would receive the funding and the weapons necessary to carry out victory against the enemy. And a man true to his word, and as he has been on multiple trips here to Ukraine since the full-scale invasion, we did receive the money that was promised to us. I remember right before Easter, Senator Breuer messaged and said, the money's going to be sent and the bills are going to be passed, you'll have the weapons. So with that, let me turn it over to a great leader, a great man, and most importantly, a great friend of Ukraine, Senator Tom Breuer. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you, Sergeant Ashton. You have been more than kind. Well, first, I want to thank everyone for taking the time to be here today and for being able to use the facility here. We have been in the Ukraine for a little over a week. We started in Kyiv with meetings with government officials and NGOs. We then moved on to Kharkiv. We were fortunate yesterday to be able to meet with the mayor and to see your underground schools. We also had a chance to go out and see the Relief Coordination Center. And yesterday we had a chance to see a farm that had been destroyed not far from Kharkiv. So we've had a chance to quickly see the current situation here. And my job is to take the information that we get from our trip, which will continue for the rest of the month, and then share that with Congress so they understand the needs and how the money is to be used and what is going to be needed in the future. And so that's my mission here now, is to be a conduit of information and to help folks in the United States to better understand the situation here.
Senator Breuer, if you don't mind, we have some media from both Ukraine and the United States here in the audience at Kharkiv Media Hub today. And I know they want to ask you some questions, and I would like to ask you some questions. All I've been next to you, I'm really interested in your thoughts on where certain things are going. So if you don't mind to open the floor to questions, we'd like to do so.
whatever you want.
Great.
Colleagues, in case you're going to have any questions, you can raise your hand and I will provide you with the assistance and the microphone. Yes, we have the first question from our Ukrainian colleagues.
Добрий день, я попрошу про переклад. Можна, да? Том, я хотів би пару питань поставити. Скажіть, будь ласка, чи перед голосуванням Конгресу показували дані американської розвідки, і чи саме це стало вирішальним для зміни позиції республіканців? From American intelligence.
Changed the minds some people to vote for this.
Republicans.
Republicans, yeah, Republicans.
It was a combination of things. That's a good question. Remember that the fight, the argument within Congress was over the requirement in the mind of some people to make sure that the southern border requirements were a part of this package. And that's what caused a delay and some difficulties. I think it was an understanding that there was a strong need in the Ukraine. It was a need to help with preparations in Thailand, or I'm sorry, in Taiwan, and then also the need to help Israel. It wasn't until they divided the package, removed the southern border, that it was able to have the needed votes to pass it. It was still delayed longer than it should have been, and I apologize that there was a delay there. Unfortunately, I couldn't control all of that. But now I think it's important that what we do is continue the message about the situation in the Ukraine so it's fresh in the senator and congressman's mind so we don't get in this situation again, that they understand that this is a single need that needs to be looked at alone and not with other packages, and that it be timely so that we don't have lives lost because we're not providing enough support in a timely manner.
My question was, what the American intelligence told congressmen and was it?
So one specification following this question. So was there any information from the US intelligence about the situation maybe in Ukraine or the other plans, and how, if that information was open to the publicity, was it the influence on the Republicans in order to create the final decision either to vote or not to vote for this law?
I understand your question now. I think it was a combination of intelligence, but I think what happened is over the time that you've been waiting for the aid package, the Russians massed soldiers and equipment not far from here, and it became obvious that there was going to be an attack and that the need was getting more and more every day. And there had to be a point where they needed to move forward with the package. Now, how much information they were given, how much secretive intelligence was shared, I don't know exactly how much that was, but it was enough to where they understood the importance of getting the package approved.
So there's the second question, if you can answer, of course. So do you agree with the statement that was made by the Institute of the Research of the War, the analytics, about their following situation that this attack, this launch on the northern part of Kharkiv region could be the result of the inability of Ukrainians to use foreign weapon to target different military targets on the territory of Russian Federation, because we know that many times we've heard that from our Western partners, and many times it was stated in the media that we have this prohibition not to use the Western weapon to aim the targets on the territory of Russian Federation. Thank you.
No, another good question. I think the comments that were made by the UK about the Storm Shadow being able to be used where it was needed, whether it was in Russia or not, my opinion is that it should be the same for every weapon system that is provided, whether it be HIMARS, ATACMS, whatever system. If Russia fires from Russia into Ukraine, then Ukraine should be able to fire back into Russia. That's just the way it should be, because otherwise you're forcing the Ukrainian military to have their hands tied and not be able to fight like they should.
Thank you for this answer. Dear colleagues, any more questions?
So you've been doing many trips to Ukraine since the start of the full-scale invasion. I'm wondering, based off of what you've seen, what you've heard on this trip, what is different from last year? What is different from the previous years in terms of the fighting, in terms of the civilian cost, in terms of what you've seen?
Well, one of the first things you see is that in May and June of 2022, the country was kind of recovering from the initial attack, trying to get organized. There was a lot of questions about how much support they would receive, what would that look like, how would they use those resources. And in 2023, they were more into a rhythm. They were organized. They had the equipment, and they were trying to figure out how to train all the soldiers and prepare for an offensive. Now the situation is a little bit different in that a war that was more of an artillery war has become a drone war, and it's changed the entire battlefield. And how you think, how you plan, how you do missions, and survival on the battlefield has changed. So technology has changed not only how the war is being fought, but I think it's changed how the war will be fought in the future. And my concern is that I think that NATO and the United States will suffer a lot of casualties in the future if they don't have observers that come to the Ukraine to see how to fight the war and understand the complexities of it. So I'm hoping that one of the results will be that we provide as much drone technology as possible to Ukraine, because they have the expertise and they're the ones fighting on the battlefield right now. But with that should come American support in some capacity to learn and prepare for the future so that we don't have casualties unnecessarily.
Another question. So obviously with this new cross-border offensive in the north right now, a lot of people are frightened around the Kharkiv area, and here you are, as an elected official from the United States, being right there. You saw refugees fleeing from Vovchansk yesterday. What is your message to not just to the Ukrainian people here who might be frightened by this recent incursion, and to the American people back at home who are seeing this on the news? They're seeing this new Russian attack. What do you want people to know? And that you being here in the thick of it?
Well, let's start by talking about the American people in general. They don't hear about the war because It has fallen off of the news. It's not a part of what you hear very often. Once in a while, a small piece of news will come out, but generally it's a forgotten war in many ways. And I think what we have to do is be able to educate folks on what's happening, why it's happening, and how we can help to end the war. So that would be the American piece of it. As far as Ukraine, it is difficult times. There's no other way to put it. They are living with a war that has been going on now for 2.5 years. They have had many cases where they've lost land, they've fought back and got it back, and now they're fighting to keep it. It's meant a lot of Ukrainians have lost their homes or have had to move. And if it wasn't for the courage and the strength of the people from Ukraine, I think that it would be a much sadder situation. But they have showed that they have a very strong heart and that they want to be free. The rest of the world needs to pay very close attention, because democracy and freedom will live or die here in Ukraine. And that's what people need to remember, is that Ukraine has paid a terrible price to protect the rest of the world from a tyrant who has no respect for either democracy or freedom. But this is a message that I'm going to take back, not only to Congress, but to everyone that I have a chance to talk with in the United States, that there is a very special bond between the people of the United States and Ukraine, and we need to remember the sacrifice that they have made.
I just want to point out to the audience at home, we've just had a missile alert in Kharkiv, but the senator is still remaining steadfast, just like the partnership between the American people and the Ukrainian people. So please continue with your questions, but if you heard the noise, it is a missile alert. Missiles are most likely incoming towards Kharkiv at the moment, but the senator continues. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Questions?
I was not clairvoyant.
Yes.
Том, я розумію, що візит сьогоднішній пана Блінкена до України, ну, ви не разом, але, можливо, ви знаєте, чому приїхав держсекретар до України?
Mr. Breuer, I understand that you came not together with Mr. Blinken today. He arrived to Ukraine also today, but maybe you can specify what was the reason of his visit, because the State Secretary of the U.S. is coming to Ukraine. Maybe you have any comments about this?
Can you help me on that one?
Yes, sir. Do you have any comments as to why Secretary Blinken would have come to?
Oh, yes. Sorry, Secretary Blinken. I think he is just here to make sure that the package that was provided, there's actually been two packages, the big one that Congress has provided, and then there's another smaller package that the President has set aside. And he's trying to give clarity and understanding to the items that are in the package, and to continue to make sure that the people of Ukraine understand that we fully support them and we're behind them, and we're going to be there until the end. We're not leaving.
Thank you. We have one more question.
Сергей Козлов, Харьков Today. Вопрос такой. Как по-вашему, что нужно делать украинским медиа для того, чтобы найти короткий путь к уму и сердцу ваших избирателей, чтобы они видели, что здесь происходит?
Sergei Kozlov, Kharkiv Today, Ukrainian media. So my question is, from your point of view, what is the strategy for Ukrainian media in order how to provide the information, how to touch American hearts and minds of your electors to show them what's going on and what's happening here in Ukraine?
Again, you're asking very good questions. it is a combination of things that have worked against being able to get the message out. The war in Israel was timed at a bad point because it sucked all of the focus away from everything else in the world. But I think that we are at a point now where we can start building back the knowledge and the understanding of what's going on. Part of it is, I think there's a responsibility for those of us who feel a brotherhood with Ukraine to come here, to see and then share that with the country, the United States. So I think some of the burden is on us. I think some of it is going to be a matter of trying to explain how we move forward with this war and how we win the war, and give hope to those countries that are contributing, so they see that this is a focus and a purpose is to win the war, and that this isn't something that we're just throwing money at, that this is a end that we want to have where we're able to reoccupy the lands that were lost all the way back to 1991. That should be our standard. But part of that, it will be to explain the path ahead. How do we get there? And I think if we can do that, and the press can grab onto something that's positive, that helps them to understand, because right now, if people are confused, they just don't talk about it. And we need them to talk about it.
Thank you. I have one following question, Kharkiv Media Hub. So we know that Nebraska State is the state of agriculture, despite others, many wonderful stuff. And we know that you visited northern part of Kharkiv region yesterday, and you've been also to the land that was famous for its crops, for both corn and sunflower. Lots of cattle was here, the beef farms that were destroyed, unfortunately. So this is kind of personal question of reflection. What was your feeling? What was your impression when you saw the devastation that is going on here in Ukraine?
I like this question because I think it will be one that when we get back to Nebraska, that people will immediately understand why it is so sad that we have a situation where the farm we looked at yesterday was this large, amazing farm that had dairy cattle and other livestock and crops. And when the Russians came in, they destroyed almost the entire farm. Tractors were lost, the cattle died, and almost everything was destroyed for no reason. This was a beautiful farm, and if we can get the pictures, yesterday the farmer provided us with some. I think we have enough to tell the story of what happened. In Nebraska, it is a very, very large agricultural state. And in many ways, it's much like Ukraine, except Ukraine is bigger. But we have similar crops, similar livestock, similar conditions for summer and winter. And we will be able to tell this story, and people will immediately understand and appreciate the terrible things that have happened as part of the invasion. And I think that's good too. They must understand that it wasn't just a matter of shooting some missiles or taking over some land, but the pure, ugly destruction that came with it. Nebraska is a melting pot of people, a melting pot of different agricultural skills, whether it be farming or ranching. We have many big cattle ranches. We have lots of agricultural unique things that are made there. Tractors, combines, grain bins, irrigation. We are a perfect fit to help Ukraine rebuild its ag land, its agricultural centers, and I think that needs to start as soon as possible, not to wait until the end of the war. So that's why I think that the relationship with Nebraska and the United States is one that we need to nurture and make sure that we can do the things that need to be done as soon as possible to help.
I'd like to add to that if it's possible. The senator mentioned how Nebraska is a melting pot. The senator mentioned how Nebraska has so much in common with Ukraine. And it would be remiss of me not to point out that the congressional delegation of elected officials in Washington, D.C., representing the people of Nebraska, understand food security, understand national security. Senator Deb Fischer, who serves on the Senate Armed Forces Committee, in the Senate, was a leader in making certain that not just the $61 billion was appropriated, but in fact, the intelligence community and others were made aware that Ukraine is the front line for liberty, liberation, and the fight for democracy across the world. And then in the House of Representatives, we saw an incredible speech by Representative Flood as to the need for funding for Ukraine. But I would be, again, we can't talk about this story without talking about how important Nebraska was to the freedom of Ukraine. And that really comes back to one cornerstone, retired General Don Bacon, congressman, who is been serving beyond his years in a manner to guarantee national security, not just for the United States, but for NATO countries, starting with our partners in Ukraine. As an American citizen, giving my time to service here in Europe, I can tell you that Congressman Bacon's office understands where the intersection between America's greatness and the greatness of the rest of the world truly comes in together. And so to sit here with so many people in the audience from Nebraska, and to sit here with Senator Breuer knowing that this direct line from Senator Breuer to those leaders in Washington from Nebraska is open and available to the Ukrainian people allows me to rest easier at night as an American citizen. So I just wanted to say thank you, not just to you, Senator Breuer, but to the people of Nebraska as a whole for having elected such great leaders, such as Congressman Bacon, Senator Fischer, Congressman Flood, and others.
Well, I'd like to throw in, too, that the person who asks continuously about this trip, about how it's going, and sends almost daily messages is our governor, Governor Pillen. He's a farmer, so he has a very vested interest in hearing some of the information that we learned yesterday. But he is a huge supporter and is there. If we need anything, he will help us. So we're blessed to have him.
Are there any more questions for the senator?
Yeah. Том, знакомы вы ли с Уорреном Баффетом?
Yeah, do you know Warren Buffett? Because just the background, we thank Mr. Buffett for the support, both of Ukraine in general and for Kharkiv region, because he was the one providing many help in different directions and agriculture also. And yeah, and especially for the agricultural industry, Mr. Buffett was providing aid.
Just your thoughts on Mr. Buffett and his son.
Oh, yes. Well, great question, because the Buffett family comes from Nebraska. He has been probably as big of a supporter as any person anywhere. He has taken his personal wealth and he has done everything he can possibly to help, and I believe he'll do more to help in the future. But yes, another Nebraska connection, and I have a meeting that we're scheduling with him when I return, and I will share with him the appreciation of the people from Ukraine.
At Kharkiv Media Hub, you get breaking news. So we know that the senator is returning to speak to, the Buffett Foundation, Buffett family in Nebraska. So thank you on that. I have one more question. I want to throw this out there. Secretary of State Blinken's in town. You are a man, sir, who is an elected official, but you transcend politics. Is there an ambassadorship in your future to maybe to Ukraine? Because we need leaders like you to truly who understand the picture. So what about that, sir? Is that a possibility for you?
Well, I think for now we worry about doing everything we can to win the war, and we will let things that happen and see how it turns out.
The local media from Kharkiv get the breaking stories. I get stonewalled. Thank you, Senator. Oh, more, perfect.
One more question. Thanks for your visiting. Dmitro Kudovy, Kharkiv Media Hub. So, look, do you think that the world has no vision about future of Russia, and lack of this vision and lack of understanding how Russia has to be changed after the war? It's a big problem for supporting of Ukraine. What do you think? Because in Media Hub, we now are trying to make a platform for starting to discuss this problem, because only two countries discussing this story, in Ukraine and in Russia. And that's all.
Well, in the United States, we are overwhelmed with Russian propaganda. And unfortunately, very few people are good historians to understand the truth. So in many cases, they are able to say things that are not true, and no one calls them out and says, no, that's not right. Many of them will believe it, and they'll repeat it. Many live on social media now. And sometimes with social media, you don't need to have a brain. You just simply repeat what you see. And when that happens, the world is a lesser place. I think the majority of Americans understand the truth about Russia, but there are many who are fooled by the propaganda. There are other countries who fear Putin and his threats about red lines and what he might do. I think he's a paper tiger. I don't think he has the best interests of Russia in mind. I think it's very personal for him. And unfortunately, the future of Russia will go with the actions of Putin. And right now, that's not a very good picture. The culture has to change there, and I don't know how you do that without the country having to go through some very hard times, whether that's the country of Russia splitting into pieces, whether that's new leadership that takes more of a democracy-like attitude. I don't think it'll ever be a democracy. I think they've spent too much time either under communism or under a person of strength or power that it's kind of the world they know. But right now, it is difficult to get the truth to the people about Russia because of the amount of money and effort that they're spending on fooling everyone possible with their propaganda.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody. I do thank Mr. Tom Breuer for letting us this opportunity to talk to you, to share your opinion. And we've talked about similarities between Ukraine, between Kharkiv region and state of Nebraska. And I would just like to sum up this with the one difference, because the slogan of Nebraska State is "Welcome to Nebraska land, where the West begins." And we're here in Kharkiv, on the frontier of their freedom, so we are where the West probably ends. Thank you.
where the East ends. Yes, we hope that the East will end here. So thank you one more time. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Mr. Tom Breuer, the Republican senator from state Nebraska. Thank you for your attention, and of course, glory to Ukraine.